To Spoiler Free Wrestling, the podcast edition, and we are running through everything that made headlines in the world of pro wrestling this week. But of course, this is a special AEW Revolution review episode, and it was quite an interesting night in Jacksonville, Florida. Before we get into the exploding barbed wire death match between Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega, I feel we should talk a little bit about an exploding barbed wire death match that took place in 1993 between Onita and Terry Funk. And so at the end of that match, I'm pretty sure Onita had already won the match, right? So the match is over. But it's the same thing that Moxley and Omega had, where after 30 minutes, the entire ring is going to explode. And so I watched this match again before watching Moxley versus Omega. And I remember thinking, like, what a spectacle this is. So at the end of Onita versus Terry Funk, after Onita and Funk have put each other into barbed wire and gone through hell and bloodied each other up and just really delivered these acts of ultra violence from Clockwork Orange style ultra violence, the ultra violence between Onita and Terry Funk had taken place. But when that ring was going to explode, Onita, he was out of the ring, but suddenly it dawned on him, I can't just leave Terry Funk in the ring to take the brunt of these explosions. That's too far. After all that we went through, that's just too far. So Onita, he dives right back into the ring. And the siren's going and the countdown's going and there's a ticking clock. There's going to be a bomb that's going to go off. And Onita starts trying to wake up Funk. He's trying to do whatever he can. It's like trying to get a guy out of a burning building, but Funk is just non-responsive. And it occurs to Onita, the only thing that he can do now is to lie on top of Terry Funk and shield him from the massive explosions that are going to go off. And in 1993, when this scenario played out, at the end of the countdown, massive explosions went off all around the ring. I don't know if any went off like actually in the ring, but like around the ring. The camera pans back and it's in like a stadium show, like probably like a baseball stadium or something like that. And just the visual of all these explosions going off around the ring. Now, in reality, it's entirely possible that none of those explosions actually even made contact with Onita and Funk. I mean, maybe they did. Certainly some of the explosions in the match did, but maybe that big ending one. The big ending explosion was just this big spectacle. And when the explosions were all over, the whole area was covered in smoke. Like, you couldn't see anything. You couldn't see Onita. You couldn't see Terry Funk. Now, mind you, this is using cameras from back in 1993. But anyway, you couldn't see anything. And then there was like a buzz around the crowd as the smoke started to dissipate. And we saw that Onita was lying motionless on top of Terry Funk. And what a story that was. The story that, as much as these two men wanted to kill each other throughout the match, by the end of the match, they were united. They were brothers. Onita just couldn't leave Funk to be blown up. And a very similar story took place at AEW Revolution, albeit with a little bit of, with some things that were a little bit different. So at the end of the exploding barbed wire death match at AEW Revolution, so Omega's already won the match. Just as Moxley had alluded to him feeling like it was going to happen, like Moxley had cut a promo saying, this might be a trap, you know? Gallows and Anderson are going to come in and cost me the match, and that's exactly what happened. They brought Omega a bat and barbed wire that had an explosive on it, and they hit Moxley with that, and then gave him the one-winged angel onto a chair and got the pin. Actually, a really cool spot that had happened just before then was Omega gave Moxley the one-winged angel near the ropes, but then Moxley got his foot on the rope to break up the pin, which is that like nobody, not in AEW anyway, nobody's kicked out of the one-winged angel. Puts his foot on the rope, that causes an explosion. The explosion goes off in Omega's face. Like there was a lot of really cool stuff that happened in that match. Unfortunately, I don't think the stuff that happened during the actual match is going to be what people remember as well. Certainly enough people are going to remember that the actual match was really fun. But so at the end of the match, we are treated to like an homage to the Onita Terry Funk match. And so what happens is he's been handcuffed by Anderson and Gallows. He's so bloodied up. He's so beat up. He's just not aware of his surroundings. Can't leave the ring. It's a bloody mess. Eddie Kingston comes out. Eddie Kingston, who had been involved in like a vicious, violent feud with Jon Moxley just a little while ago, just before Moxley lost the title to Omega. So these two have like a violent history. They mentioned on commentary, well, yeah, these two used to be friends. And that was the story in their feud. We used to be friends, but then Kingston felt like Moxley sold him out by going to WWE and not bringing him with him was kind of the thing there. So Kingston, even though he'd had a blood rivalry with this guy, Jon Moxley, he had the same mentality that Onita did in 1993. I don't care how much of a rival this guy is. I don't care how bloody our feud is. I can't leave him in there to be blown up. So Kingston comes in, and Kingston has such a respect for wrestling's history, right? So Kingston comes in and he's playing the role of Onita. He's trying to wake up Moxley. He's trying to get him to be conscious so he can get out of the ring and out of danger. And wouldn't that have been an ending where everyone gets out of the way in time and is safe at the end? But instead, Kingston realizes, oh no, I'm not going to be able to get Omega out of here I'm not going to be able to get Moxley out of here in time. My only option is to do exactly what Onita did in 1993. He even laid on top of him in the same way in 1993. And so I'm watching this with 10 seconds to go until crazy disappointment. But I'm watching this having just watched this Onita Terry Funk match and seeing what Kingston's doing, seeing the homage that they are giving to this famous match. I was like, this is awesome. I love this. This is fantastic. The only thing that's left is for the camera to pan back so we get a wide shot of the ring and all of these explosions, which are no doubt going to go off around the ring area, and it's going to be this big spectacle. And then after the explosions go off, there's going to be so much smoke, we're not even going to be able to see Kingston laying on top of a prone Jon Moxley to shield him from the mighty danger that is all around him. But what ended up happening is we got a pyrotechnics display, which would like maybe a fraction as powerful as the pyrotechnics Cody uses regularly for his entrance. Something went very wrong. And all you saw was like basically the ring post had some sparklers coming out. Like it looked like the sparklers you might put on a child's birthday cake. And then there was like maybe like 4 little cap gun explosion type things that took place in front of the ring. So something got messed up. So something didn't quite work because the visual was a complete dud. The visual was just like, oh no. Because you think back to other times in wrestling history when this has happened and how poorly received it has been. And in my mind, the first thing that I went back to was a match that took place in the 90s in WCW, like the early to mid 90s, something like that. And it was like a Chamber of Horrors match or something like that with Cactus Jack and Abdullah the Butcher and a bunch of others were in there. And the big thing was at the end of the match, Abdullah the Butcher was supposed to be sitting in this almost like an electric chair type thing, and then they'd electrocute him. And again, it was just a case of like, they'd planned to have a pyrotechnics display and something just didn't work and it fell so flat. And that's what this reminded me of too. Like you are building everybody up to this big thing. You've got a ticking clock coming down to a big spectacle, and the big spectacle was nothing. Just a whole lot of nothing. But what made this even worse, and like, look, I love the show. I'm a big supporter of AEW. I don't know. I just couldn't help but laugh. And I remember thinking like, well, I mean, you know, this isn't the worst thing in the world. They're going to get a lot of slack for this. Flack. They're going to get a lot of flack for this. They're not going to be cut a lot of slack. They're going to get flack. And obviously the AEW detractors are going to go to town on this. So it's not great. But you know what? It was such a fun show. And it's been such a fun promotion to follow since they were created. You know, I feel like, all right, well, you can have one of these, you know. But what made the whole end of the pay-per-view feel pretty awkward was that they were going for the same sort of end to the Onita Funk match where like the smoke clears and all you see is these two motionless men near death, basically. But when you just had like a few sparklers go off and then Eddie Kingston is just lying like he's dead. And like, what's he supposed to do? You know, he's got no piece in his ear telling him, oh, the explosions didn't go off. Just pretend like you don't know what's going on. He's got to go through with the script. John Moxley's got to go through with the script. But when it happened, when the actual kind of like explosions just petered out there, like a low rent fireworks display, all of the commentators took a beat, right? Like nobody said anything for a bit as everybody just figured out how are we supposed to play this. Now, so the pay-per-view goes off the air with just Eddie Kingston playing up like these sparklers destroyed him. He might never be the same again. And so that's a little awkward. Then we get, some of us just went straight to bed at that point. Some people stayed up and went on social media. If you went on social media, AEW posted a post-event promo from Jon Moxley. And in it, Moxley says, oh, well, Kenny Omega proved that he can't build a bomb. And Tony Khan reiterated that statements later in the post-event media scrum. So that's the storyline. The storyline is not now that this was a big explosion that nearly killed these two guys. The story is Kenny Omega's bomb was defective. But then you have to go, well, wait a second. If Kenny Omega's bomb was defective, why is Eddie Kingston acting like this thing just about killed him? And unfortunately, I think we are now, in the first case I can remember anyway, of having to use headcanon to explain something in AEW. This happens all the time in WWE. I don't think I've ever had to do it with New Japan Pro Wrestling. But anyway, with AEW, you know, you normally don't have to make up storylines in your head so that they make sense, but you might have to do one here. I imagine this is going to get addressed on Dynamite, but if your story is that the bomb was a complete dud built by Kenny Omega, you then have to explain why Eddie Kingston acted like he was dead. And I think you can do that. If you basically just say, oh, well, some debris from the bombs that did go off, flew off, and it hit Kingston in the head. And you didn't see it, the cameras didn't pick it up, but it happened. You could do something like that. And it's fine. And you've still got the storyline of, you know, Kingston didn't know the bomb was a dud. Kingston assumed that the ring was going to explode. So he, in his mind, was sacrificing his body for Jon Moxley. That's going to be a bond between those two characters now, even if the bomb was a dud. The bond is strong, even if the bomb was not. So now, two things are the case for Eddie Kingston, Jon Moxley. One, Jon Moxley's out of the title picture. He lost the title. He lost the rematch. Jon Moxley's gone from the AEW World title scene for a while. Kingston and Jon Moxley now have a newfound bond, friendship. They're allies. It's a brotherhood. They're blood brothers, you know. So I would imagine that those two are going to become a tag team. And Moxley had done an interview not long ago where he talked about how he wanted to form a tag team with Brody Lee. And you know, unfortunately, Brody Lee passed away at the end of 2020. And so sadly, we're never going to get to see that. But Moxley had spoke about how, look, AEW puts such a great emphasis on tag team wrestling. I'd like to get in there. I'd like, if I can get a partner that really, really works, that fits as a partner, that can be like my long-term tag partner, not just two single guys put together, but like a good tag team partner, I can get in there and mix it up with some of the best tag teams in the world. And unfortunately, his first pick, Brody Lee, like I said, we're never going to see that happen, unfortunately. But the tag team of Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley, that sounds pretty exciting. I'll take that. I'll take Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley versus the Young Bucks. That sounds fine to me. I'll take Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley versus FTR. That sounds fine to me too. And it runs parallel a little bit to Kenny Omega last year, or in the first year of AEW, basically. Because he lost some early matches and was taken out of the title picture. Remember they did sort of like a mini tournament to determine the first AEW World Champion, and it was the winner of the Casino Battle Royale, which was Hangman Page, would face the winner of Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho, which ended up being Jericho. So Omega loses that match. He then loses a match to Pac, although he got that win back. But he also lost a lights out match to Jon Moxley, although that match doesn't officially affect the standings in AEW. Anyway, a bunch of early losses, and Omega was out of the world title picture. So he moved to the tag division. He teams up with Hangman Page, who was also out of the title picture because he lost to Jericho. And so they formed this great tag team. Like, Hangman Page and Kenny Omega were a fantastic tag team. Remember that match at Revolution in 2020, Hangman Page and Omega versus the Young Bucks? That was incredible. So I wonder, now you got Jon Moxley kind of following the same pattern. He falls out of the world title picture. So now his emphasis, it looks like, might be on tag team wrestling. That's just speculation. I don't know that that's going to happen. But based on what happened with him and Eddie Kingston at the end of Revolution, I would say that they are moving into the tag team. Now, I'm assuming AEW had planned that it would seem like those two got exploded or blown up at the end of Revolution. So they might not be around for a while, or that might have been the plan, is for them to take off for a while and sell their injuries. But that's might not be what they do now because of how everything sort of played out at the end of Revolution. But, it's unfortunately how that show ended is something that's going to be remembered for a while. AEW is a promotion that I don't think they've had too many blunders. Obviously, wrestling's subjective, and in my subjective opinion, I really enjoy AEW shows, and not a lot has happened that really made me go, that wasn't really my reaction to the explosion last night, too. I kind of had a laugh, and then I just sort of felt bad for the people involved, but it's certainly something that's going to be talked about for a while. Hopefully it does not, I know for me, it didn't ruin the pay-per-view for me. It didn't at all. I still really enjoyed the match. I really enjoyed that they were trying to tell the Onita Terry Funk story, they did tell that story, the Onita Terry Funk story. It's just the big special effects at the end were obviously a far cry from what happened in 1993. But we'll see where they go from here. It was certainly the most controversial. I don't know if controversial is the right word, but there was certainly a lot to talk about coming out of AEW Revolution last night. The second most notable thing that took place at AEW Revolution last night was the signing of Christian Cage, taking his old outside of WWE name of Christian Cage, which always reminds me of Johnny Cage from Mortal Kombat. I think that's kind of where he got it. But I was happy to see, thrilled to see Christian in AEW. But his signing kind of takes place under this umbrella of Paul White, the Big Show, coming out on Dynamite and saying, this is a Hall of Fame worthy signing, and Christian is a Hall of Fame worthy signing. No doubt in my mind about that. And Tony Khan would later say, this is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Also one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. But Christian generates some really polarizing reactions in terms of how important people feel he is in wrestling history. There are a lot of people who say Christian is one of the most innovative wrestlers, one of the most, as highly rated as he is, he's still underrated. One of the best minds in the business is what Tony Khan referred to him as in the post-event media scrum. Christian, but some people don't see Christian as that big of a star. Vince McMahon appears to be one of those people. And I thought that how AEW built up Christian signing versus how WWE has sort of treated Christian his whole career is very fitting. It really sums up the varying opinions that wrestling fans have on Christian, with a huge chunk of them being like, this guy's amazing, this guy's Hall of Fame worthy, this guy's one of my favorite wrestlers, to there being like a fair amount of other people who are like, I'm not really sure I see what the big deal is with him. And Vince McMahon, it feels like WWE has never really appreciated Christian, despite all the things that Christian has done throughout his career for that company. You go back to the late 90s and you talk about Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys, reviving tag team wrestling. Like, what those guys did in the 90s for tag team wrestling, I mean, there are only two real great periods of tag team wrestling in WWF. And that's in the 80s when you had like the Hart Foundation, the British Bulldogs, guys like that. And in the 90s when you had Edge and Christian, Hardy Boys, Dudley Boys, teams like that. So he's a huge innovator in wrestling just for the stuff that he did during that period. And then the stuff that like happened later in his career, it always felt like the fans were hoping for Christian to be pushed to a certain level, but Vince would only ever let him get so far. And he is a two-time world champion. But if you look at that title run, boy, did it seem like he didn't have the office behind him. Because first he wins the title. He won the title. I don't know if it was the show or the pay-per-view after Edge retired, but it was like around the same time frame. And he beat Alberto Del Rio in a ladder match to win the title, and Edge helped. And it was a very emotional and really great moment for both of them. You know, Edge's career is coming to an end, but one of the last things that he does before retiring is he helps his best friend Christian, guy who he broke into the business with. They're both from kind of around where I am. I know it says they're from Toronto. They're actually from Orangeville, which is like an hour and a half drive away, but it's like pretty much the same. Edge used to work at like a mall near me. And anyway, so they like so he beats Del Rio for the title, but then he loses it really quickly to Randy Orton. And then his second title reign it was really cool. because it was this very intricate, like complex heel turn that he did where everybody loved him. But because Christian kept going on about, oh, I deserve one more match against Randy Orton, fans started to turn against him. And all of a sudden, Christian now, people have turned against him because he's like, I deserve one more match after failing and then he's cheating, he's doing underhanded things, and finally he won the title from Randy Orton by disqualification. And so it was a really cool kind of way that they did it, but at no point was WWE building up Christian as like a major guy, like he held the world title, but he was never going to be their top babyface. He was never going to be their top heel. Because remember, they had the WWE. He won the World Heavyweight Championship. They also had the WWE Championship at the time. So like in WWE, this was definitely a period where having the World Championship doesn't necessarily mean you were even in that top tier of talent, right? But everybody else was kind of saying like, no, I see Christian as this guy, like I see him as a main eventer world champion. I always feel like there were people in WWE who was pushing for that, but Vince was pushing back. Because it always seemed he'd get to a certain level, but then he'd just be taken down a notch. And him signing with AEW, I think, is a perfect example of WWE not recognizing what they have with Christian. Because Christian was in the Royal Rumble. Christian was in the 2021 Royal Rumble. A year after Edge made his dramatic return to the wrestling ring, Christian made his. And I actually felt that this was coming because remember they had this thing on Raw where Christian had an unsanctioned match with Randy Orton. They didn't really wrestle, but they advertised that Christian was going to wrestle. I remember thinking like, that's kind of weird considering they won't allow him to wrestle. So it seemed like, yeah, I think this guy's coming back. And then he's in the Royal Rumble. And he embraces with Edge. And I remember thinking, this must have been the plan all along. Just before Edge returns, like a few months return, Edge and Christian cancel their podcast. They're like, we're done with this. Edge shows up in the Royal Rumble. He has his big dramatic return. I mean, he was injured for like 9 months during his year back, but that's okay. And then it just made all the sense in the world that Christian would return the next year. They embrace in the ring, and I'm thinking, we're getting Edge and Christian back. We're finally getting Edge and Christian back. Jey Uso does an interview with Fox Sports, starts talking about how he wants to see the Usos versus Edge and Christian. I get really excited that we're going to get Edge and Christian. You know who was not excited about getting Edge and Christian at all? WWE, apparently, because they didn't sign Christian. And so Tony Khan on the post-event media scrum says, I didn't know Christian was a free agent. Christian called me, said, I want to wrestle for AEW. I want to wrestle regularly, And Tony Khan was like, great. You're one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Come on in. And so Christian at 47 years old. Now there is some confusion over, like, was Christian ever like medically disqualified from wrestling? Kind of, sort of. By WWE's doctors, yes. Based on history of concussions. But his like number of concussions alone is not really like gonna get you disqualified. There has to be like brain damage, right? And so remember everything that Daniel Bryan went through to get cleared. I don't know that Christian went through the same things, but I'm sure he could have. So, but I remember at the time, like when Christian was under contract WWE and they just weren't having him wrestle, Christian would never say anything, but like, I remember once somebody asked him about being retired and he said, I'm not retired. Like just very bluntly. And he hadn't wrestled in a couple of years at that point. So I feel like, yeah, Christian maybe always had it in the back of his head that like, he's not done. And so I'm really interested in seeing what Christian does next because I think Christian at 47 years old, being that wrestlers now are going much later into their careers, he's got a chance to end his career now in a way that will make him feel good, will leave a lasting legacy. And he's got a partner promotion now in AEW that believes in him way more than WWE seems to. Because look at how AEW built him up. WWE would never build Christian up that much. They don't see him like that. AEW sees Christian as one of the best minds in the business. That's what Tony Khan said at the post-event media scrum. Hall of Fame worthy performer, which is what Paul White said when they were building him up. And he's worthy of just being a big, huge surprise on a pay-per-view. When Christian came back to WWE after many, many years, he just kind of came out. You know, they don't treat him like the big star that Tony Khan sees him as. And so now Christian is going to get to end his career in a company that sees him in the same way that many fans do. And I think that's really exciting. I want to run down the rest of AEW Revolution, but before going into the rest of the pay-per-view, I feel like we should spend a little bit of time talking about Shaquille O'Neal from Wednesday night's Dynamite. I thought he did an incredible job. Now, all he did was he body slammed some people. He gave Cody a power bomb with a nice Brody Lee tribute. So he gives Cody Rhodes a power bomb, and he does the Brody Lee sort of thing before he does it. And what I loved about that was, and I've known this about Shaq going back to the 90s, but it showed he's a wrestling fan. But there's a difference between a wrestling fan who's yeah, I love wrestling and they watch it every once in a while, and somebody who really gets it and knows it. And I feel like the Brody Lee tribute that Shaq did, even if somebody told him to do it, I found it to be a very respectful action from a celebrity done towards wrestling, right? It showed respect for wrestling. It showed he's a wrestling fan. I loved it. He did some body slams, did, whatever. But the thing about Shaq is when he got in there, I realized, oh my God, Shaq is a giant. Shaq is a giant man. And I never really got that impression of him when he was in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal that one time, because he was in there and he is face to face with Big Show, who is also a giant. And then there's just so many other big guys in WWE. AEW, the average wrestler size, I don't have any stats to back this up, but it feels like the average wrestler size is much smaller. And Shaq just felt like he took up so much space. If you remember during that match, there was at least once the referee, I think it was Bryce Remsburg, Bryce, the referee, had to kind of tell Shaq not to wander down the apron in front of the hard cam, because he's so big that if he does that, you can't see the match from that angle because all you see is Shaq. And I love giants in wrestling, right? They are such an important part of wrestling history. And I feel like AEW just added 2 of them. You bring in Big Show, and Big Show's, he's 49 years old. But the last time I saw Big Show wrestle, remember he did that match where he got thrown through a cage or something like that and went in for hip surgery? He still seems like he's moving around fine, and he's almost 50. He certainly seems like he was moving around better, even at his age, height, and weight, than Kurt Angle was during Kurt Angle's last run. I mean, obviously Angle's had so many neck problems that's probably not surprising, but still, I kind of feel like Big Show can still wrestle, especially if he's just going to do giant stuff, like what Shaq was doing on Wednesday night. Shaq just did real basic stuff, but because of his size and the way Cody sold for him, Cody and the other guys he was slamming around, he really came off as somebody that looks dominant in the ring in a storyline perspective, obviously, but in kayfabe, he looks like, oh my God, Shaq would be a force in the ring. So I want to see more Shaq in AEW. More Shaq. If it's possible, can you do a few matches a year? Could you get a singles match out of a Cody Rhodes versus Shaq singles match? You could probably do that. Like, Cody's smart enough to write out a story that you could do. The whole psychology of the match is built in for you. It's just Giant versus David, right? Cody's got to figure out how to chop down that tree and slam. He kind of slammed him. It didn't look good, but and so you could do something like that, and you could build Shaquille O'Neal up as this attraction monster, Brock Lesnar, Andre the Giant style wrestler that comes in every once in a while, but is so much of a giant and so dominating looking that he's a big draw and he brings in that big fight feel. I think that would be great. And so Shaq versus Cody Rhodes, I think that's a possible singles match. Shaq versus Big Show. You gotta give us Shaq versus Big Show. We had that match promised to us in another company for years, and it was never presented. And Tony Khan likes to take little shots at WWE. It's all over most of the broadcasts. Like, Scorpio Sky won the TNT or the ladder match by pulling down a brass ring. That's a direct shot at Vince McMahon, because he used that term brass ring when he was on the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast. So Tony Khan likes to take shots at WWE. What better shot could he deliver than giving the match that WWE promised but never delivered for so long, the Shaquille O'Neal versus Big Show match? That could be a match. What else could Shaq do? I don't know. But I think he really demonstrated that he can go in there and he can put on a performance, was he the greatest wrestler in the world? Is he going to be doing Hurricane Ranas and shooting stars splashes? Did he demonstrate the athletic ability that Pat McAfee did? No, he didn't do any of those things. But he's a 7-foot, 300-pound giant who is a spectacle in the ring. Shaq just being in the ring is 1,000 times bigger of a spectacle than the sparklers that came out of the ring posts last night in the exploding barbed wire death match. And, I think it's really exciting, the future that you can get with Shaq in AEW. And I really hope that he does more in-ring work moving forward. Just run down everything that took place on the pay-per-view last night. So we'll start off with the buy-in. Britt Baker, she was supposed to team up with Rebel to go up against Riho and Thunder Rosa. However, they said that Rebel... Wait, what's her real name? Her real name's Rebel. Britt Baker calls her Reba. Okay, so Rebel was injured. And so they were allowed to bring in a replacement. So Britt Baker brings out Maki Itoh, who has won over the hearts of so many through the women's title eliminator tournament. She is a very interesting character. So obviously, like, I've seen her a bit in Joshi stuff, but I haven't had a lot of experience with Maki Itoh before she came to AEW. I don't really understand all the sort of like that Idol program. Like, I guess she was a former pop star on some like reality TV show, I'm guessing. But she was voted off for not being popular enough. Something like that. I don't know. Take all the words I said are true in some way. But so she comes out, she does this singing thing, and she's just sort of this like, girl that likes to give people the finger and say really disgusting things and stuff like that. But she's kind of exciting to watch in the ring, right? Like, she does the, what's it called? That headbutt. Oh my God. I'm completely forgetting the name. Kokeshi. The Kokeshi headbutt that you see Hanma in New Japan Pro Wrestling do all the time. But every time Maki Itoh does this, I burst out laughing because she just comes off the ropes and then it's like she just goes dead weight and planks and like goes right down. Like, she's really funny, like she's really funny and she's got a lot of entertaining stuff to her. And I guess like some of the things that some people maybe don't like that much about Joshi style wrestling is it does seem kind of silly. You know, there's a lot of silliness to it. A lot of comedy, I guess. But I really feel like Itoh, that's her strength. You know, she can come out and her facial reactions, and she does that funny headbutt, and she's got some other things that she does, and her singing entrance. Like, it's fun. And people have started to respond to that in AEW. So it sounds like, I would imagine she's now going to be somebody who's a regular on Dynamite. Because that's what they need to build with their women's division, is like a roster of people that you know can draw ratings, right? Like, if you look at the men's division, they've got so many people they know are going to draw ratings. But the marquee names that they were able to sign when they started this promotion in the women's division weren't great. Like, there weren't a lot of marquee names there. Like, Britt Baker was one of the most famous people that they signed when they started. And this was before Baker became more famous on AEW Dynamite, right? So they've really had to work to build stars in their women's division. But slowly but surely, I think they are getting there. Like, if AEW had been able to sign Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch when they started, you'd be seeing the women's division getting a lot of screen time. But because they came into it with less star power, or considerably less star power in that division compared to their other divisions. And so they've had to work to build these stars. But I think you're starting to get a bunch now who are in that category. I think fans have started to understand that if you see Hikaru Shida wrestle, it's going to be a good wrestling match. I think they're starting to see that with Serena Deeb and Riho and Thunder Rosa. I think Britt Baker's been one of the most entertaining parts of the show for a long time now. So they're getting there. And I think Maki Itoh coming in, it's going to help a little bit. And it was Itoh and Britt Baker who picked up the win here. Rebel hit Thunder Rosa in the head with a crutch. So continuing that feud between Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa. And so this will lead, they're doing now like a 6-person match on Dynamite that will also include Ryo Mizunami on the babyface team, and then Rebel is going to team with Baker and Itoh. I think Itoh's a heel right now. I mean, she came out with Baker. She kind of flipped off the crowd, like gave them all the finger. But I don't know. She's so popular. I mean, you're not really going to make her a heel, are you? But she was out with the heel team here, and she's teaming up with the heel team on Wednesday. But I just can't see that happening. We'll see. We'll see where they go with Maki Itoh from here. But, you know. Then we moved on this. So the first match on the pay-per-view was for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. The Young Bucks beat Chris Jericho and MJF in a match that had a lot of near falls that I totally bought. And I went into this match figuring that the Young Bucks were probably going to retain. Well, actually, a part of me was worried that they weren't going to retain. Like, I thought it would be too early for the Young Bucks to lose the tag titles. Like, the Young Bucks are such a popular and over team that I think it's good for the tag team titles for them to have a really long reign with the belts, right? I think it's good. It makes the titles feel important for them to be on a very well-established team for a long time. Then it's a really big accomplishment when somebody beats them for the titles. But I was worried that the Young Bucks sort of suffer from like a reverse Hollywood Hogan type condition. You know how like the concern with Hogan when he had creative control in his WCW contract is that he'd always make himself win. I feel like it's the opposite with the Young Bucks. I'm worried they don't have themselves win enough, right? Like, you know, they booked themselves to lose to Private Party in that tournament to determine inaugural champions. They've lost a lot of matches. They lost to Omega and Page at Revolution. So I was worried that the Young Bucks would think, oh, we don't need the titles. So we can lose them quickly and no one will care. Like I worried that was their mentality. But I still felt like in the end, somebody was going to make sure these belts stay on the Young Bucks. And that is what happened. But there was a few near falls in this match that led me to believe MJF and Jericho were going to win the titles. There was one part where Jericho hit Matt Jackson in the back with a baseball bat, and then MJF hit him with that heat-seeking pile driver. And I'm like, oh my God, MJF and Chris Jericho are going to win the tag titles. I maybe didn't say, oh my God. That maybe is a little bit bigger of a reaction than I had. It was more like, oh, wow, MJF and Jericho are going to win the tag titles. Wow. And then I started like in my head, even before they pinned him, in my head, I was like, well, I guess they're going to do this MJF and Jericho as the tag champs, and then they'll blame each other when they lose the titles later or whatever. But then Matt Jackson kicked out. And I was like, okay, great. And then later, I can't remember who it was, but the Bucks gave one of MJF or Jericho that Kamigoye double knee. And I think it was Jericho, but then MJF broke up the pin. But that was something like, I don't think I've seen anybody kick out of that move. I don't think I'd even seen a pin after that move being broken up before. So I was worried. I was like, ooh, they hit their super finisher and it didn't end the match. That probably means Jericho and MJF are going to win. So throughout the whole last 5-10 minutes of this match, 10 minutes might be a stretch. Throughout the last 5 minutes of this match, I had no idea who was going to win. And it was just constant near fall after near fall. And I think that's when wrestling's at its best. When you don't know who's going to win, and there's all these near falls and exciting moves, and you're getting invested, and you don't know if that hand's gonna hit the mat for a third time, or if they're gonna get out. That's when wrestling's really exciting, and I think they definitely hit on that in this match, where there was a good stretch of just near falls, and you don't know who's gonna win, and with the tag titles on the line and how important AEW's made those belts feel, it really just added to this match a whole lot. The way the match played out actually reminded me a little bit of that Riho Serena Deeb match, where there was a bunch of near falls in that, and then there was those reversing pinning combination spot that they were doing, where it's like Riho had her in a pin, and then Serena had her in a pin, and it's all this great back and forth wrestling, and then finally Riho just pinned her with one of those pinning combinations, and I thought that was. And that match gets incredibly great reviews. Everybody was talking about how great that match was. And I felt like it was good for the same reason. It was good because you were buying all these near falls as potentially the finish of the match. You didn't know who was going to win. You cared about who wins. It matters who wins. And so when Riho won, it was exciting. But the long and short of it here, the Young Bucks, they now leave Revolution, still the tag team titles, or still the tag team champions. And then later in the show, they interviewed Chris Jericho and MJF. And Jericho said that some changes need to be coming to the Inner Circle. And they announced a segment, some type of war room type thing they're going to do with the Inner Circle next week. There's always just an Inner Circle something. Like an Inner Circle town hall, an Inner Circle press conference, an Inner Circle something. So I think we're getting an Inner Circle something on Wednesday. Then right after the tag team title match, we moved into the Casino Tag Team Royale, with the winners receiving a future tag shot at the champions. And there were so many tag teams in this match that I also found that just being able to visualize how deep this division is and how many teams are going after the titles made the division feel so important, right? If you go to WWE, there's maybe 3 established teams on Raw, maybe another 3 on SmackDown, and they just kind of rotate the belt. And so winning the belt isn't so much of an accomplishment as it is just, well, you're one of 3 tag teams and we need to put the belt on somebody, so here you go. And it can even feel that way in New Japan Pro Wrestling a little bit. Outside of the World Tag League, there's not a lot of established, there's the Guerrillas of Destiny, and for a long time you had Evil and Sonata, or you had War Machine, or, but it was always, you'd have a handful, maybe a handful of established teams. And then there'd be some teams that would just come in for the World Tag League. So it doesn't feel like the tag belts are just rotated to whoever in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Like, ultimately, you have to be the best tag team in New Japan Pro Wrestling to win World Tag League or win the titles at the Tokyo Dome. But like, anybody can win the tag. Like, it feels like throughout the year, there's not that much emphasis on the division outside of the tournaments, and outside of what the Guerrillas of Destiny are doing. But anyway, but just watching this and you're like, oh, look at it. There's over a dozen teams. Like, you really have to work your way up to be one of the top tag teams in AEW. And, a lot of these teams, they could be in AEW for like 10 years and never win the tag belts. And I like that. I like the idea that you can have a long career in a division and never be a champion, because that's how it happens in real combat sports. That's how it happens in, baseball or hockey. You play on a team for years, you never win the Stanley Cup or something like that. So it makes the tag titles feel that much more important, that there's so many teams out there chasing after them, that you really have to be the best to win the belts. This was a rather long match, almost about a half an hour, and just checking out all these different teams doing fun stuff. And you get to see guys like John Silver and Alex Reynolds and the Jurassic Express, and Evil Uno took a real botch of a spill to the outside during this. That was definitely something that'll show up on those Botchamania videos. Marco Stunt gave Evil Uno like a Hurricane Rana, like a head scissors. And Uno, I don't know if he just misjudged where he was, but ended up like taking this Hurricane Rana and then like sprinting right into the post, but it was delayed enough that it looked very fake. But anyway, so this match comes down to Phoenix, Pac, and Jungle Boy at the end. Jungle Boy looks like he's in a lot of trouble. However, Pac charges at him. Jungle Boy pulls down the ropes. Pac goes out, and then it's Phoenix and Jungle Boy. And you really got on full display here just how good Phoenix is. Like, Phoenix reminds me so much of Rey Mysterio in that he just flies around the ring, and you're like, how can a human being even be that agile? I would really say, like, Phoenix is probably one of, I mean, he's one of the most talented wrestlers in the world. Like, no doubt. And so he ends up eliminating Jungle Boy. So it's Phoenix and Pac now will take on the Young Bucks for the tag team titles. And so you've got the best tag team in the world, the Young Bucks, against two of the most talented wrestlers in the world, Phoenix and Pac. So that's going to be, I don't think they announced when that match is going to take place, but surely that's got to be a main event of like a big Dynamite. I mean, that's going to be a tear down the house style match. Like, you're putting some of the best wrestlers in the world against each other in that match there. So that will be something. Then after that, we had the AEW Women's World Championship match. We talked a little bit about the developing women's division here. And one thing I just kind of want to mention again, I feel fans are now starting to understand how good Hikaru Shida is. Like, remember when this division started, it was just a whole bunch of people a lot of fans didn't know, right? Like, there wasn't really anyone that your casual fan would have a lot of experience with. And so there was a lot of getting to know these wrestlers. And if there's one wrestler that is really just, the cream has risen to the top here, and that's Hikaru Shida. She just seems like every match she has is just good. She's so crisp in the ring. She's so agile. She tells a story with her faces, with her face. She just says one, but she does good work with that face. She doesn't need more than one, I don't think. So she defeated Ryo Mizunami here. The match did, to me, it felt like these two were very tired near the end of it. But it was a fun match. It just seemed like maybe these two are kind of gassed near the end of it. It reminded me a little bit of like when you get to an MMA fight and there's like 2 minutes left and like neither guy has enough to finish the other one, but they're trying anyway. It definitely it didn't take away from the match at all. I still think it was fun. But I was thinking during this match about where do you go with Hikaru Shida now? Because she has cleaned out this division. Just cleaned it out. And then after the match, Nyla Rose comes out and attacks her. I'm like, not again. How many times have we seen Hikaru Shida defeat Nyla Rose? I feel like I've been seeing this match over and over again. And I didn't want Nyla Rose to win the women's title eliminator tournament for that very reason. I was like, I just feel like we've seen Shida versus Nyla Rose. We've seen Shida beat Nyla Rose. That's over. It's handled. Nyla Rose is not as good of a wrestler in storyline as Hikaru Shida. So I didn't want us to go there. But then I thought they did such a great job of building up Jade Cargill on Dynamite that, like, is she perhaps an option for the next place you go with this division? I would have to say yes. Like, so that segment, Jade Cargill and Shaquille O'Neal defeating Cody Rhodes and Red Velvet. That did like almost 1.2 million viewers or something like that, like drew a huge rating. And who came out looking like the strongest wrestler, like the most dominant wrestler of anyone in there? It was Jade Cargill. She was the one that got the pin on Red Velvet. Okay, yes, Shaq looked really dominant, looked fantastic. But when that match ended, there was one person standing over their opponent, and that was Jade Cargill. And so I was a little surprised to see Jade Cargill just in the audience at AEW Revolution, like in the area where they just have the wrestlers and stuff. And like, I get that you have to do that because those guys go in there and they make a lot of the sound and stuff. And because they've been tested, they can be near each other and stuff. So, well, I don't know if they can, but you know. So it seemed like, well, aren't you taking away from Cargill's, like, je ne sais quoi a little bit, like by having her out there? You take some of the spectacle away from her. Like, if she's special, why is she just sitting in the audience with the wrestlers who work on Dark, right? Like, but I mean, whatever. Like, it's not really that big of a deal. They didn't focus on her too. Well, they focused on her once, and she was sort of applauding Cody, which was weird because you just wrestled him, but that's all right. Anyway, I don't think that any of that stuff matters to a big degree. I do think that they did a great job of making Jade Cargill look like a dominant wrestler, and Jade Cargill has done a great job of making herself look like a dominant wrestler, both with her physique and with how she's performed since she's been in this role. So I wonder if that's the next big women's title match is Hikaru Shida versus Jade Cargill. And I don't know that Cargill doesn't win that match. But then you might be thinking, okay, well, fans like having Hikaru Shida as champion. Jade Cargill can do some other stuff for a while. So I don't know. Maybe we just move into a Jade Cargill versus Red Velvet feud for a little bit. Maybe Shida does move on and feuds with Nyla Rose again. Maybe Shida goes on and takes on some other wrestlers. But just up on your screen right now, let's just take a look at Hikaru Shida's cage match stats. And let's just see who she has defeated here in her title reign. So if you're watching on YouTube, so just on your screen right now, she's had the title for 289 days. She's defended it 7 times. She beat Nyla Rose for the title at Double or Nothing 2020. She's beaten Penelope Ford, Thunder Rosa, Big Swole, Nyla Rose again at Full Gear 2020. So we've had Hikaru Shida defeat Nyla Rose on 2 pay-per-views already. And then we see, so that's done. Please no more. It's done now. Hikaru Shida defeated Anna Jay on a Dynamite. She defeated Abaddon on New Year's Smash. She's now defeated Ryu Mizunami. So you kind of look like, I mean, Britt Baker. You could do Britt Baker versus Hikaru Shida. Now, Baker did challenge for the title against Riho. So if you look, yeah, Britt Baker Okay, so Riho beat Nyla Rose in the first ever AEW Women's World Title match on the first ever Dynamite. Then Riho's first title defense was against Britt Baker, which was on the third ever Dynamite. Then Britt Baker, Nyla Rose, and Hikaru Shida all challenged Riho at AEW Dynamite Homecoming on New Year's Day 2020. We were all probably thinking, wow, what does 2020 have in store for us, on New Year's Day 2020? I wonder if this year will be unique in any way, some of us must have thought. So it kind of feels like everybody in the division has sort of been beaten at this point. Like Hikaru Shida has cleaned out the division except for Britt Baker. But Britt Baker's been defeated by Riho a couple of times and stuff like that. So Baker's had her shots at the titles and failed. And this is a problem that you run into when you just don't have a lot of top names in your division. You run out of matchups. And so that's what this division needs, is more marquee names that you can put in these matchups. So like build up some people. Jade Cargill gives you a new person like that. Thunder Rosa gives you a new person like that. Serena Deeb's out of action for a little bit. She had like minor knee surgery, she tweeted out. Like, I don't know if she was just getting her knee scoped or whatever, but she's going to be out for a little bit. So it's all just about building up new challengers and fresh matchups in a division that it doesn't have a lot of fresh matchups at the moment. I think Jade Cargill and her rise to the top of the division is going to open up a lot of doors. Red Velvet seems like someone that they have a lot of confidence in as well. She was certainly in a big match there. I think Red Velvet could be somebody that they put a little bit more emphasis on moving forward. We already talked about Maki Itoh. Tony Khan spoke a little bit about Big Swole. Big Swole's only wrestled one match in 2021. She's had some flare-ups with Crohn's disease. And not having her around is, it's a blow, because she had really been someone that had risen to the top of the division. She's a great personality. She was doing some fun stuff in the ring. Getting Big Swole back soon would be a big help to this division. But I think there's a lot of reasons to feel positive about AEW's women's division moving forward. I personally think Jade Cargill is probably the most exciting one. But the thing with the women's division, like, because that free agent pool isn't that big to draw from, like, they can't go out and get a big show for their women's division, right? Like, if you look at some of the female free agents that are available, slim pickings, kind of. Like, there's people out there. Don't get me wrong. There's Tessa Blanchard, but there's been some issues there. And I don't think, AEW sort of said, hey, I don't think Tessa's coming in here. There's, remember Lil Swole, Nicole Savoy? I think she could come in. Allison Kay, they had her come in for Dark. Kelly Klein, remember, like, Kelly Klein hasn't done anything since Ring of Honor. She seems like somebody, like, why not give her a shot? But I don't know if I don't know if that's someone who's on their radar. Kelly Klein and Joey Mercury, by the way, have launched lawsuits against Ring of Honor regarding how their time with the company ended. There's a lot of falling out there, a lot of public statements made as well. So anyway, let's move. So that was Hikaru Shida, Ryo Mizunami, and we'll see where that division moves forward on Wednesday. Then Miro and Kip Sabian defeated Orange Cassidy and Chuck Taylor, and it sort of feels like this was a bit of a blow-off to this feud. A lot of people have sort of complained about Miro involved in what I've heard described as a mid-card style feud. I guess it's that, but Orange Cassidy, to me, seems like somebody who's been in at least main events on Dynamite. He's certainly main event in terms of merch sales. So I don't know if AEW saw this as a mid-card angle that they were putting Miro into. I think they saw this as bigger than what many fans have seen it as. I think it has. I think they've been hurt by Trent being out with injury. I think that probably prevented them from doing some matches that they would have liked to have done. I think the wedding fell a little flat. I think everybody knew it was going to be Orange Cassidy coming out of something, and it just didn't seem to have that big entertaining feel that a lot of weddings in wrestling do. But this match seemed to really communicate to fans that we're about to really see Miro in AEW now. Yeah, he's been playing around doing this Twitch stuff, doing this video game stuff with Kip Sabian, being the best man with Kip Sabian, but things are about to get real. And so he gets the submission on Chuck Taylor, on his butler Charles. And this happened after Penelope Ford had been hurt and Kip Sabian went to go check on Penelope Ford. Miro doesn't care at all about Penelope Ford, tells Kip Sabian to tag him, tags him in, comes in, gets Chuck Taylor to submit, cuts a promo about like basically, you know, he's coming to dominate was sort of the feel of it. And I feel like Miro not caring about Penelope Ford's injury means he's done with them. He's no longer Kip Sabian's best man. And it felt like this was the blow off to this whole angle. And we don't know where Kip Sabian goes. We don't know where the best friends go. But Miro is about to be a much bigger deal in AEW. That's what it feels like to me. From there, we went on to Hangman Adam Page defeated Big Money Matt Hardy in a match where the winner receives the 2021, the first quarter of 2021's pay for the other one. And Hangman Page won this match with some help from the Dark Order. So Matt Hardy seems like he's building almost like a stable of wrestlers that do his bidding. We saw him give Jack Evans some money to attack some people he's working with, Private Party and whatever. But so to counteract all these people that had Matt Hardy's back, the Dark Order needed to have Hangman Page's back. And I loved the way this match ended because it was basically Hangman Page had been thrown out of the ring, but as he's going out of the ring, the Dark Order catch him and just sort of push him back up. He goes up, he does the buckshot lariat, pins Matt Hardy. He celebrates in the ring with the Dark Order. Remember, he's not in the Dark Order, they're just his friends. But it's this feel-good moment of the Dark Order, who everybody loves, you know, and Hangman Page, who, you know, Page has been burned being with a group before, how the Elite treated him and everything like that. So he's this anxious millennial cowboy that, you know, sticks to his own guns kind of thing. And he's weary about signing up with another team. But the Dark Order are just such good guys that they helped him win. They don't care if he's in the group or not. They just want to be good friends with Hangman Page and that's how that segment ended. So I thought it was kind of funny. After this, Matt Hardy sent a tweet that was to his wife apologizing for all the money that he lost. Thought that was pretty funny. I would love to see Rebby Hardy come out on Dynamite on Wednesday and just lay into Matt Hardy for being irresponsible. That would be very funny to me. From there, we went to the Face of the Revolution ladder match for a future AEW TNT Championship match. And so they had announced that there was going to be like a new signing, right? Like that was going to be in this match. There was going to be the new signing that Paul White was going to announce, and there was going to be somebody that just comes out during this ladder match. And the person that came out was Ethan Page. Now, to me, this was great because I enjoy Ethan Page, and Ethan Page is from about a 20-minute drive from here. There's a lot of, like, he's from Hamilton. I'm recording this from Toronto. So he had been, I don't want to say like a big star on the independent scene here, but very well known on the independent scene here. And this is before he went to Impact Wrestling or anything like that. And he runs a promotion out of Hamilton, and they would always bring in Cody Rhodes. Like after Cody Rhodes left WWE, but before AEW started, Cody was like a regular at these shows in Hamilton. He'd also go to Ottawa too. I don't know if Page was running those shows. And I remember thinking, like, could somebody from Toronto not book Cody in Toronto like the night after he goes to Hamilton? But for whatever reason, it never seemed to happen. Then he goes to Impact Wrestling. He does really well with Josh Alexander. Like, him and Josh Alexander have been a tag team for a long time. Josh Alexander, also from the Toronto area. And so they'd been a great tag team in Impact Wrestling. But I'd always known he was going to end up in AEW because I know how well Ethan Page and Cody Rhodes have gotten along. Like, there's some friendship there, right? That Cody has a lot of respect for Ethan Page. That's why he was always going to those shows. Like, Hamilton's, I mean, I like Hamilton, but, like, you know, why are you skipping over Toronto shows to go to Hamilton shows? Well, I think it's just he really enjoyed the kind of shows that Ethan Page was running out there, and I imagine will be running out there still when the pandemic ends. So this match had a lot of fun stuff to it, you know, but in the end it was Scorpio Sky who would go up and pull down the brass ring, the literal brass ring. And he earns a TNT title shot. This was actually his first match in a while. He was out with a torn something or other. And so he'd been out for a couple of months. He returns here. And now Scorpio Sky will wrestle Darby Allin on Wednesday for the TNT Championship. And I think that should be a pretty fun match. And it does sort of beg the question, like, how, you know, what is Scorpio Sky's ceiling, you know? Could he be a TNT champion? How far can he go, you know? He's a great wrestler, obviously. Did really fun stuff with SCU. Him and Kazarian, the first ever AEW Tag Team Champion. So he's got stuff on his resume now, right? Like, you can't just call him a journeyman guy trying to get his first shot. He's been there. He's just trying to do it in the singles division now. He's already won gold. He's already a former champion. But he's trying to do it as a singles now. And he's got a new podcast out as well. So, I mean, definitely winning this match shows that, hey, they believe Scorpio Sky can be a guy. But he needs to go out there and have some, like, stellar matchups with big name talent, prove that he can draw ratings. Yeah, you know, something like that. But he'll get a chance to go in there against Darby Allin. And I think this will be a really key match for Scorpio Sky. You know, he has the chance to win over a lot of fans going in there against Darby Allin. We'll see. Maybe, you know, yeah, we'll just see. Maybe an angle comes out of it. I have an idea of something that might happen, but I don't want to say. I know I would know anyway. It would just be me thinking of ideas on the top of my head. So Ethan Page is announced as the first big surprise, and then after this, Christian comes out. Didn't really do much. Just kind of came out. There was a countdown, and then Christian came out. There was 2 countdowns during the show. One when Christian came out, and one when some sparklers went off on the ring posts. Christian's debut, I think, was a little bit better received than the sparklers on the ring posts. Although some people thought Kurt Angle was coming. Although with Christian, the thing, like, you remember how bad Kurt Angle looked in his last few matches in WWE? Not moving around too good. Christian can wrestle. Like, Christian, when you saw him in the Royal Rumble, he looked good, man. He looked like Edge. He looked like those two have probably been working out together. So we already talked about Christian and how I think a lot of fans of Christian are really excited about what he's going to do in AEW, albeit a little disappointed that we're not going to see Edge and Christian reunite, at least not in WWE. From there, we move on to the cinematic street fight between Darby Allin and Sting against Team Taz's Brian Cage and Ricky Starks. And I was listening to Darby Allin talk about this match in the post-event media scrum. And Tony Khan, I think, talked about this a little bit too. I think, anyway. But, like, Darby Allin, he produces all of those vignettes and videos that he sends in. And he's a film school dropout. Like all of his films seem to have like this brooding, dark, black and white kind of feel to them. And that's exactly what this cinematic match felt like. It felt like a match taking place within one of Darby Allin's videos. And Sting just fits so well with this. And the way that Sting did his makeup so that half his face was Darby's makeup and Darby did his makeup so half his face was Sting's. I really felt that strengthened the alliance between these two. I think if they both keep that face paint, it'll be easy for fans to see that Darby and Sting are cut from the same mold. Like maybe they're not a team, but whatever dark, brooding, weird, multiverse located dimension that produced Sting is the same that produced Darby Allin. I'm not talking about like a literal dimension, but like, you know, the essence of Sting, whatever is the essence of Sting that makes him that character, that lives inside Darby Allin too. And visually, I felt like they visually communicated that very well at AEW Revolution. So I just like the whole vibe of the match. And then there was just some stuff that they did that I thought was cool. Like Darby Allin jumping off the walls and stuff like that. Really, I thought was interesting. But honestly, it was just great to see Sting do something, you know? Like Sting's last match was in 2015. And it did not go well. Like, does anybody remember that match in Night of Champions 2015 when Seth Rollins did the buckle bomb and then you just heard Sting yell? And then it, like, I don't know how long it was actually, but it felt like just like an hour of doctors checking on Sting before they finally did some silly little ending thing, right? I can't even remember how that match ended, but I remember hearing Sting yell out in pain, and I remember just the awkwardness of just like, well, there goes Sting's career. And then just for this to happen, it just erases that ugliness from your head, right? Like you don't think of that as how Sting left the wrestling industry. Now, if this is Sting's last match, this is how he left the wrestling industry. If he has more wrestling matches, that will be how he leaves the wrestling industry. But I enjoyed this very much. And it got me wondering about the future of cinematic matches a little bit in wrestling post-pandemic. And the reason I'm a little worried they won't continue is because if you've got a crowd of 15, 20,000 people, it's hard to make them watch a screen for a whole show. If you've only got 1,000 people, but you've got 100,000 people on pay-per-view watching it, it's a little easier to make that decision to have a cinematic match, right? But I just think a cinematic match is such a perfect way to keep legends in the industry longer, right? Legends matches with Sting. Hey, we can see Sting 4 times a year on pay-per-view if you give us cinematic matches with him that often. You know, after the Boneyard match at WrestleMania last year, I think there were a lot of people saying, look, there's no reason I can't see The Undertaker do this once a year. And I was a little disappointed that The Undertaker retired in that docuseries because it just, like, why not do another Boneyard match? Why not do another cinematic match? If actors can be out there doing this stuff in their 80s, you know, why can't a wrestler be subbed out for a stunt double even? You could even do something like that in some occasions. But keeping the characters alive, I think, is a way to help these characters continue to make money later in their careers, which is great. You know, do we really want old wrestling legends to be worried about money in their later years? No, because we like them, right? So we don't want bad things for them. So that was Darby Allin and Sting beating Brian Cage and Ricky Starks. I thought that was really fun and just a real feel-good way to watch Sting wrestle again. And then, of course, we went to the exploding barbed wire death match. We already talked about that, but so that was AEW Revolution. And I mean, love it or hate it, when people think of AEW Revolution 2021, they're going to think of those sparklers going off on the ring post and the botched explosion and sort of the disappointment that occurred there. But if you take that out of it, I mean, it was just another AEW pay-per-view that furthered storylines, ended storylines, had some great action, some great matches, and was a lot of fun. Finally, the last thing that we should talk about before we go, I know it's a big AEW Revolution pay-per-view. I wanted to focus on that, but Bobby Lashley won the WWE Championship for the first time on Monday night, and I feel like we got to talk about it. I ended up turning the show off. I knew exactly what they were doing, and I did not have time for it. The way they did this thing, the match was supposed to happen at 9. Miz runs away or says he has a stomach ache or something. They don't end up doing the match until the big main event. And I was just like, I know Bobby Lashley's winning this. I think this is just such a silly little thing that they're doing to ensure people watch the whole show. And I was just like, whatever, I'll see it in the morning. And that's what I did. But I just feel like Bobby Lashley is a guy who super deserves it, you know? He's 44 years old. This is his first WWE championship. He probably thought this might not ever be happening, you know? But he's a guy like where if he hadn't have left WWE when he did, I'm sure it would have happened earlier. But, you know, he wanted to go into MMA and do this stuff and great. And, you know, Bobby Lashley is just this guy where, like, he's been in the industry for so long and you've never really ever heard anybody say anything bad about him. Like, I don't think so anyway. But he's just such a physical presence in the ring, and he does cool things in the ring, and he just looks like somebody who should have been a WWE champion a long time ago. So that it has finally happened now, I think is great. I think that the Hurt Business, this really helps the Hurt Business feel like a main event faction now, right? Like they had been the kings of the Raw mid-card for a long time. Like if you ask me, hey, what goes on in the Raw mid-card? I'd be like, the Hurt Business. But now with Bobby Lashley as the WWE champion, they're a main event faction. And I don't know. I just thought that was great. Good for Bobby Lashley. Good for the Hurt Business. And we'll see if he can retain that title at WrestleMania. I wonder if he'll have to defend it against Drew McIntyre. I wonder if that's the match that they're building. And if that is the match that they're building, I wonder who wins that. Yeah. All right, but I just wanted to quickly mention that because, you know, obviously a new WWE champion, that is significant, and a new WWE champion winning it for the first time, that's even more significant. And so we'll see now where WWE goes with Bobby Lashley as the champion of the Raw brand. But that's going to do us for this week, guys. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed AEW Revolution, and I will talk to you again next week.